What matters most when streaming House Hunters?
Location.
Location.
And that location is Discovery Plus. Start your free trial to get more.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez.
The streaming home of House Hunters plus so much more is Discovery Plus.
Welcome to Inside the Criminal Mind podcast, where we analyze some of the most notorious criminal cases with psychology and criminology combined.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, Andy.
Hi, Carlos. How you been?
Doing pretty well. Doing well. How about you?
Well, I've been great. You can see I'm wearing my summer attire. It's finally summer here in central New York. It's probably 75 to 80 degrees with a slight breeze off the lake. I'll give our listeners the central New York weather forecast. In 6 to 7 hours, we might have 3 inches of snow on the ground.
You never know with New York.
Never know.
Well, today we're heading back to NorCal for those people in California, Northern California. If you're a real Californian, you'd say NorCal. But up there's an unsolved murder that we've all heard about. This is why I think people are going to be excited to hear your take on it. As an FBI profiler for over 3 decades, Behavioral Science Unit LLC is his company now, folks. You can find it at behavioralscienceunit.com. So you definitely want to check it out. Before we get started, so we're talking about the Zodiac Killer, folks, but before we get started, make sure to share, subscribe, and hit that like button. You know we like it. So we're talking about the Zodiac Killer today. It's the only name we have for him. It's the pseudonym of the serial killer who operated in North California for over a decade, I think, almost a decade, at least the late 1960s to the early 1970s. The killer's name originated in a series of taunting letters and cards sent to the San Francisco Bay Area press. These letters included 4 cryptograms or ciphers, and I'm sure Andy will talk a little bit later how some of these killers like to inject themselves into these investigations. The Zodiac murdered 5 known victims in Benicia, I think it is, hopefully, Vallejo, Napa County, and San Francisco, respectively, between December 1968 and October 1969. The unusual thing here is he targeted young couples, with 2 of the men surviving attempted murder. Maybe we'll look at it psychologically a little later. Andy can tell us, is he overcompensating, trying to take the men out and saying, I'm what you really need, not him? I don't know. He also murdered a male cab driver. The Zodiac himself once claimed to have murdered 37, but we do know serial killers sometimes hyperbolize and blow those numbers out of proportion, and sometimes they don't. Depends on what their motives are. He has been linked to several other cold cases, and Andy's going to tell us a little bit more about the different cold cases. Is it still active or not? He's going to tell us all about that. San Francisco Police Department, well, I won't get into that. But anyway, he did murder for sure, at least that they have 5 confirmed dead, 2 injured, but the possible ranges from anywhere between 20 to 37 possible murders. So from this point on, I'm going to hand it over to Andy Brangle. Andy, tell us a little bit about what's going on here.
Well, Carlos, this is an interesting case. And as you just stated very succinctly, it's an open case in terms of who done it. What's interesting about this investigation is the ciphers. There are 4 ciphers that he sent to media outlets, taunting not only the media, but also the police in this particular case. We know that the murders occurred in California. So this serial killer operated in a very small geographical area that is known to police investigators, the northern part of California, from the late 60s through the late 70s that are known. As you mentioned, he has bragged about up to 37 murders, but only about half dozen have been attributed to him. It's interesting that he attacked couples, usually couples in at lovers' lanes, and the first 2 murders occurred near a lake. And what was interesting about those cases, to me anyway, is that you associate these types of killings to other types of killings that are similar, serial killers that have the same types of modus operandi, same type of standards of killing. And there are 2 that came to mind when I was looking at this particular case. One is Danny Rawling down in Florida, who also attacked couples. Did not sexually molest them. There was no evidence of that. Oftentimes, as we've talked in the past, there is a form of sexual perversion as part of the signature of these types of serial killers. But in this particular case, attacked couples like Danny Rawling. Another one, David Berkowitz. And what's interesting about the Berkowitz case in this particular case is the use of a weapon, a gun. So in the first two murders, the Faraday and Jensen, young teenagers, one 17, one 16, they were shot and killed in 1968 at Lake Herman Road. And this is in the city limits of Valencia, California. And he comes up to the car and tells them to get out of the car. So they're in Lover's Lane, and he drives his car up beside them, as it's now theorized, gets out of his car with a weapon, believed to be a Luger, and he tells them to get out of the car. But before David Faraday could get out of the car, he shoots him in the head, kills him, and then shoots Betty Jensen several times, I think 5 times in the back as she flees. And the second killings were a 19-year-old and 22-year-old shot pretty close to the same location where the male survived that attack. So it seems to me that when we look at this particular killer, he has some of the similar kind of traits, personality traits that you might find in a David Berkowitz, Son of Sam killer, and perhaps some of the same drivers, the same motives and compulsions. So he may have a borderline personality disorder. He's got this mentality of certainly catch me if you can, in terms of his taunting of the media and the police. He thinks he's smarter than everyone around him, and he uses these ciphers, cryptograms, to kind of create a puzzle, if you will, to find him. What's different from a lot of cases, like the Dennis Rader case and a number of others, where there is a close connection between the killer and the victim. And, oftentimes we talked about this, the act for the serial killers is instrumental, right? It's the murder is a way for them to get the release, an emotional and psychological release. And so the murder is almost secondary. They want to control the victim to the point where they see them die. And it's oftentimes up close and personal, a hammer, a shovel, a knife
or something like that. Yeah.
A knife, exactly, a box cutter, hands and strangling, literature like Wayne Gacy used a choking mechanism.
Hey, Andy, and using those different types of weapons can say a lot, doesn't it? Obviously, it's much more personal when you use a knife or you're strangling somebody. And a lot of these guys are sadistic and they enjoy watching them suffer. Am I accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the need for controlling that victim, right? They want to regain maybe perhaps some control that they lost early in life, and so they want to dominate and control somebody, these victims, and that gives them sexual gratification. In this particular case, you have somebody attacking from a distance with a gun, shooting couples. So there may be some angst, some sexual identification issues that this individual has. Although he talks about in one of the letters, the joys of killing, he says, that they actually, it gets him off more than being with a woman and having sex. So he's describing some of that. Now, having said that, what I found interesting in the letters themselves is a number of typos. And so he's not articulate, but he might be intelligent. He certainly didn't have a spell check back in the late 60s. He says, I like killing people because it's so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is more dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. So you see his grammar is a bit off. And this is a run-on sentence, by the way. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, which he misspells Paradice, and all that I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow SLOI down or atop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. And that's all one sentence. So what's interesting to me is that this guy who's not really articulate.
Do you think he's doing it on purpose, making people think he's not as smart?
Perhaps, but then again, he uses these cipher codes, of which a couple were solved in
Because that misspelling of slow is pretty obvious.
Yeah,
you don't usually spell it slowy.
Well,
Paradise, I wonder if it's a play on words.
Yeah, and it's not like the W and the I key are anywhere close on the keyboard either. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
So, but in any case, in a turn of this investigation, there were a couple people that broke the first two codes. These were cyber sleuths, and I think this is the interesting part of this case. There's a lot of interesting elements to this investigation. The fact that it's unsolved is very interesting, particularly with multiple jurisdictions and the federal support, and they still and in the advances in forensic sciences, including the DNA, which we're about to get into. But it's still unsolved. So that's interesting, certainly. But I think what's also interesting, and it's very common with these cold cases now, is that you have communities that have sprung up virtually that are cyber sleuths. And they take these cases and they run with them with various theories. And from that, because there were 4 ciphers that were in the public domain, 2 of them actually were solved. One was 32 character long, and one was 13 character long cipher, and they were both solved some years ago. There were 2 left, but these 2 ciphers were considered unsolvable because they were very, very short. However, there is a Moroccan Frenchman, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, but Zeroui. And he's a 38-year-old Frenchman, engineered by training. And he decided, he read an article in France on this killer, the Zodiac killer, and unsolved crimes. And it fascinated him, the fact that these 2 ciphers existed that had been unsolved. So he decided he was going to give it a crack. And within 2 weeks, Carlos, he claims he solved both ciphers. So what's interesting in this case is that he, after 2 weeks of intense code breaking, he deciphered the first code as a sentence: Labor Day fine 45.069 Nort, N-O-R-T, dropped off the H, 58.719 West. So these are geographical coordinates. So when he looked at the coordinates, it was interesting because it was near a school in Lake Tahoe, a city in California referred to in another of the Zodiac killer's postcards. And this was like in 1971. So the coordinates match up to a location that was referenced in a postcard sent by the killer. Obviously coincidental, but perhaps instrumental in identifying who this killer might be. The second one's even more interesting because he claims to have solved this second code without an encryption key, and he came up with the name Lawrence K, K-A-Y-E. And this guy his background is a salesman and a career criminal living close to South Lake Tahoe, the coordinates that were in the previous. And this is the most interesting part, he had been a suspect in this investigation, actually the lead suspect of one of the lead detectives who's now deceased, a guy named Harvey Hines, one of the detectives. And Detective Hines thought that K was the Zodiac killer, but could never convince his superiors that he had enough evidence to move forward on the K lead. He is now passed. However, what's interesting about this is that Mr. Zaroui said that the cipher comes out to a sentence, very short sentence: my name is K, K-A-Y-E. The problem is when he first did it, it came up as K-A-Y-R, and that's what he posted. So Zaroui decided he was going to put all his findings on one of these community websites, right? These solve the crime websites. And what happened almost immediately was he became a target. He was attacked. Within 30 minutes, his posting of the suspect's particular name was taken off. He was criticized as having no science or knowledge of regarding these ciphers and their ability to be solved. His comments were dismissed on many of the forums that he put on as being arcane and nonsensical and rabbit holes and so forth. He said they claimed that his processes and methodologies for deciphering these codes were too convoluted. One of the leaders of these cipher sites said in a written exchange that his solution was nothing that hundreds of proposals already existed, and it's impossible to solve. What's interesting to me is what you and I talked about. This is human nature. People are really quick to attack and criticize because now they've become wedded to this unsolvable puzzle. And so it's funny to me that this not funny like funny but ironic that this killer, who may in fact be dead himself. I mean, these murders occurred 50 years ago, right?
It's about at least 30, 50
70, 30,
years.
20. Yeah. So we're looking at 50 plus years.
Reminds me of my age, so I'm trying not to remember. Go ahead.
Even if this guy was 20, if the murder was 20 and you add 50, he's 70. He's got to be in his 70s or 80s now, more than likely. And as an earlier description of the killer, a white male in his early 20s, that would put him around mid 70s or in his 70s. And he's likely either dead or certainly not the threat that he was in the past, and will likely die as as unpunished bad guy, criminal.
That's the weird thing about him, is that he could still be a threat because he just shot him.
Yeah, but again, most of if you shoot people for 50 years, your chances of not being caught are slim to none.
So you think he's retired many years ago?
Yeah, and there are cases of serial killers that go into sort of remission, if you will. They go into hiding.
Cooling off period.
Yeah, their compulsions cease or more manageable. A lot of different reasons and speculation as to why that might be. But in any case, in this particular investigation, I think that it will likely be solved eventually through those forensics examinations, through advances in DNA, and probably not the solving of a cipher code. Because all you end up with the cipher code is, and I think that's the ironic point, is that all you end up with is a hypothesis, a conclusion without real evidence. And humans seem to have more trust in hard science than cipher codes that don't have an encryption key. And as you know, from understanding, ciphers and encryption, you need the key in order to truly have the evidence that this is what the sentence or sentiment might be saying.
Or is the Rosetta Stone?
Yeah, so my point is that I don't think this case is going to be solved by these cyber sleuths looking at a series of symbols and numbers. I think that this will be solved like the Golden Gate killer. I think what was his name? Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo.
Yeah.
And that was solved through DNA. So here's where we are in this particular case. The San Francisco Police Department marked it inactive in 2004, reopened it in 2007. There are several of the local counties, Napa County, Solano County. They have this as an open cold case. But in 2018, the Vallejo Police Department announced their intention to attempt to collect the killer's DNA from the back of stamps that he used. So this guy, back in the day, he licked the stamps and sent them, right? So we have some DNA, although it's basically, dinosaur age. But with the advances in DNA technology, they can extrapolate that DNA from the back of that stamp. And so they've attempted to do that as late as 2018. They were supposed to have the results out. According to Vallejo Police, they were supposed to have the results out by May 2018. It's now May 2021, and there's been no report. And the police department's mum, they're not saying what, if anything, was found in that DNA analysis. Huh. So it may be that they have some results, but they don't have a match with a subject yet. which would then probably logically eliminate Key or K, Lawrence K, as a suspect, because one would have to think that Lawrence K, being a suspect in the previous investigation, had some DNA, of some type.
I wonder if they're also looking at ancestral DNA genealogy. Maybe they're starting to contact friends and family members, whoever that DNA came up with, to see.
Yeah, so they could do that, and that's how, of course, the Golden State Killer. That's how exactly how they did that. So yeah. I think that this case certainly has a good chance of being solved. And I think, again, going back to the irony, if it is solved, it's based on the arrogance of the killer who provided the vital forensic evidence through the licking of these stamps that will be his undoing, not the nebulous coding of symbols and numbers without an encryption key.
What do you think he's like? Do you have any kind of image of the individual? Do you picture him as a person who's a loner, sadistic?
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't have.
I think this is a borderline personality disorder. Someone who has been inadequate in his life, has not maintained any meaningful relationship. Had a very difficult time with women. I think he probably had a very difficult time in relationship with his own mother. And so I think this individual, is looking to fill that need that he has, that compulsion he had, and strike out against individuals who he sees have the life that he wanted. No different than, Berkowitz and a number of others in that sense. And so I think that's why he attacked couples. And I think that's why, the act of rape was not a compulsion of his, either male or female. He wanted these people to die, but he was too cowardly to do it, or didn't have the need to do it up close and personal, like a Dennis Rader and a number of others.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. It's interesting the way he did it too. And obviously there's some sense of inadequacy happening with him too.
Yeah. And perhaps that's why he chose to use a weapon, because he probably didn't have enough confidence in himself to go and fight another male who might overpower him and kill him. So he kills the male first. He shoots the male first and then shoots the female, right? Who he might perceive to be weaker than himself. But in any case, it's a person who is definitely inadequate and probably had a very difficult early life.
Fascinating stuff, my friend. Fascinating stuff, especially that part about the human nature too. It's interesting. Kind of telling about today's world. Every time somebody has an idea, if it conflicts with the group, they shut it down.
Well, that's cognitive closure, right? Yeah, that's a fascinating point. I think when we're inside the box, we believe we already have the truth. We are unaccepting and intolerant of anybody that might offer an alternative truth. And moreover, we start objectifying that person. They become the enemy. And that's what happened to this guy in France on these forums.
You know what I
but
found
yeah, you're
absolutely
right. That's human nature. Everybody wants to be the hero, I guess.
You know what I found interesting about it too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's fascinating because one of the comments you made when you were reading about the comments the group was making about the person's methodology. Well, this has been said before. It's nothing new. Then I'm looking at it going, then why would you take it off? if it was
Isn't
nothing new,
crazy?
It's like, okay.
Well, here's the thing. The reality is King Solomon said this. So, again, this goes back centuries, but there's nothing new under the sun. There is nothing new under the sun. And I'm a strong believer in that. I think that what you see, I look at it and equate it to music, right? There's only so many musical notes, but the combination that individuals place those notes, the order they place them, and the tempo and the variations are inexhaustible. And so they allow us to have classical music, country music, rock, soul, but you're basically talking about the same musical notes, right? And that's the same thing in terms of individual thought. There's no original thought, but this guy had a different, unique way of approaching these ciphers, and it was not locked into the previous mindsets of the group, right? He was coming from the outside. But his most difficult task wasn't solving the cipher. It was convincing people that he had solved the cipher because he had not paid his dues. He was not part of the in group, which is, to me,
we're going to get backlash.
It goes back to what you said in today's world and politics, right? We're so busy anchoring to our own beliefs and truths. We're unwilling to open our minds, think critically, and say, wow, Carlos, you know what? You might be right. I might need to adjust the way I'm thinking. And what we talked about at the behavioral science unit was when people become cognitively closed, they are no longer able to critically think. Yeah. When they're cognitively closed, they're inside a box. And they're so wedded to their truth that if you challenge it, they will quickly objectify you. And they will call you every name in the book because you are now challenging what they believe they already know. And that's why I never called myself a subject matter expert. I was always a student of the subject matter. Because if I ever decided I knew all the answers, then I could never learn anything new. And so I welcome even my students in the classroom. I welcome them to challenge my mindset, so that it would open me up to new alternative ways of thinking. Nothing original, perhaps, but a different order of notes so I can come up with a new set of music.
Not perfectly said. You're absolutely right. And it's a very dangerous mindset. I mean,
it is. It really is. And hopefully, we'll get out of that here in our country, and we'll start collaborating and working on compromise to make this great country greater and greater. I am hopeful. I'm an optimist by nature, and I saw not on the point of mass murders, but I did see in the news today that there's a new bipartisan infrastructure bill that's being passed. Well, that was a sweet little treat. You got to meet my daughter and my grandson. But yeah, I'm an optimist, Carlos, and I'm an optimist. My optimism carries forward in this investigation. I like to think that any cold case can be solved. It's just a matter of having the right circumstances and perhaps an outsider looking in to offer a different investigative hypotheses. And it never hurts to have good DNA.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Well, thanks again, Andy, for taking the time to break down this case.
Absolutely enjoyed it. I can't wait till we do another one. I hope that you're well out there in California.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk soon.
I can't wait to see what the next case is up. Folks, make sure to share, subscribe, hit that like button. We'll talk to you. And
remember, behavioralscienceunit.com. We're firing up our training for 2021. We're doing a lot of stuff on, this is no shocker, on stress management, resiliency, the science of happiness. It goes over mindfulness training, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution. We're doing a lot of training right now on relational policing. So that encompasses everything from community-oriented to intelligence-led to evidence-based policing. The peace officer, the intelligence officer, the law enforcement officer, and how every police officer is really all three of those. So if you're interested, go to the website, hit me up. I'm available for training for the rest of 2021. No masks. We're getting back to normal. We're all vaccinated. We're going to put this pandemic behind us. And we're going to continue to make America great.
All right.
Okay, confession time. I just finished back to school shopping. Nothing like the last minute, huh? Kohl's to the rescue. I got 25% off a JanSport backpack for my son, $17.99 So Jeans for my daughter, and 50% off Levi's for both kids. Levi's, can you believe it? I even got $10 off because I spent $25 and picked up Kohl's Cash. So, yeah, sometimes procrastination pays off. Select styles. 10 off 25 offer in September 6th. Levi's coupons do not apply. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
What matters most when streaming House Hunters?
Location.
And that location is Discovery Plus. Start your free trial to get more.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez.
The streaming home of House Hunters plus so much more is Discovery Plus.